Hello, everyone, and welcome to iCritic Live. This is the podcast where we talk about entertainment, pop culture, and life in between. I'm your host, Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes of your time here with me today. And it was Deadpool and Wolverine weekend. The movie ended up opening at a much better than expected $211 million domestically, over $430 million worldwide. That does not necessarily mean that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka the MCU, is back in play as a major Hollywood player, but it does show that, you bring back favorite characters like Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds, as well as a few other cameos, which I won't be discussing. But there will probably be some spoilers for Deadpool and Wolverine, just to let you know, because I did see it, but it shows that people definitely still have nostalgic feelings for some of these characters and actors, and if you put them to good use, they will come out. Well, it was also the weekend of the San Diego Comic-Con, and Marvel had their big Hall H presentation, and they made a few major announcements. And one of the announcements was that it seems like the Kang storyline is officially done. Jonathan Majors was supposed to be the next big baddie for the next two Avengers movies. He was introduced in Loki Season 1 to movie audiences in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and then he had a prominent role in Loki Season 2. And Jonathan Majors was great in the role, but you may have heard that he had some legal issues, was found partially responsible for domestic abuse, and as a result, Disney fired him. Now, there's also some talk that the Kang storyline wasn't really connecting with audiences. Personally, I think Kang and Bill Murray, I should say, were the only good things really about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I guess the 3D was also really good, but what good is 3D if the movie isn't any good? And so it was rumored that Kang would be quickly reshuffled out of the storyline, and that they would probably make Doctor Doom the next big baddie for the Avengers. And sure enough, it came to pass. The Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, has now been renamed to the Avengers Doomsday. Now, the Avengers Secret Wars has not changed. That is still on track, but it definitely seems like Kang is at the very least not going to play a major role in the movie. They're pivoting to Doctor Doom, and it kind of makes sense. There's going to be a new Fantastic Four movie and everything. I was personally hoping that they would hold off on Doctor Doom, because Doctor Doom has been the villain for every Fantastic Four movie. And I think, look, if you're going to bring Fantastic Four back, really try something new, because the last few movies didn't work very well. So let's not put all of our eggs in one basket. But, here's the thing. The MCU has been in a low point. Deadpool and Wolverine being the exception. A lot of the Marvel movies have not been successful. The TV shows have been even less successful. And I sense there's thinking behind Marvel, like, we have to go back to what worked. Personally, I think you should just wrap up the series and pause making Marvel movies for several years, and then you can go back to making more of them. Give people a chance to miss them again. I think the overabundance of product, in the sense that there is now more product than there is demand for these movies, is what's really the problem. But I digress. At Comic-Con, aside from this title announcement, they also announced that Joe and Anthony Russo would be returning to helm the next two Avengers films. Now, a lot of people got really excited about this because they made Avengers Infinity War, and they made Captain America Civil War, and of course Avengers Endgame. These are all very good movies. I think they also made Captain America the Winter Soldier. Yes, I believe they did, because I had them sign my Winter Soldier Blu-ray. So yeah, that was really cool. So anyway, they've made some very good movies for the MCU, and for a while they were kind of seen as the next big directors because of the work. Oh my gosh, they're making some of the best installments in the Marvel movies, and so they're really great. Now, here's the thing: once the Russo brothers left Marvel, And they, by the way, said they would never return because, they had gotten their success there. They're going to go make their own movies. Then they did not make movies that were so good after that. They made movies like The Gray Man and Cherry and Extraction. I mean, these were not good movies. Now, most of them were for Netflix and Apple TV, which that does kind of bring to question, like, well, what's the point of getting all of this success with the Marvel movies if you go out and you can only make movies for, like, Netflix and things like that? I think the last movie they made was a Netflix movie called The Electric State. It's coming up. It hasn't been released yet. We'll see if that one is any good, but it's another Netflix movie, so So they have not had a great track record for success. In fact, the only thing that they had in their hands that maybe could have been a success was Everything Everywhere All at Once. They are listed as the executive producers, but they really didn't do anything with that movie. They came across the script and said, oh, this is really good, and they handed it over to A24 and said, you might want to consider making this. And A24 did, therefore they get executive producer credit, but they did not actually do anything with that movie. It's a shame that they didn't direct it because that could have been their big comeback vehicle, although on the other hand, their directing is so straightforward that I think it would have been a very different movie. I think Daniels did a perfect job at directing that movie. They were certainly the ones for the job there. But so their post-Marvel career has not been very good. And now they're coming back to the MCU. But I don't know why people think that this is like a good thing when it's like, look, they've not been making good movies since Marvel. And keep in mind, before they made the Marvel movies, they made movies like You, Me, and Dupree, which is anyway. So, but they're back, and then they make the big announcement. They make the announcement that they are going to show off their new Doctor Doom. They found one person who they felt could really play the character, and a bunch of Doctor Dooms come on stage. One comes out from the rest of them, pulls off the mask, and it's Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. is going to be Doctor Doom, and guess what? It's because of the multiverse. Because of the multiverse thing, you can have an evil Tony Stark variant who, instead of becoming Iron Man, became Doctor Doom. Now then, this is in some ways brilliant casting. And in other ways, it just annoys me because it's like, look, I know that the MCU is in a bad state. I know they're trying to fix it. But you don't fix it by going backwards. At least not in this sense. Look, if the movies were, for example, getting way too convoluted like the multiverse stuff has been, you can go back to your roots by, okay, let's not do the multiverse thing anymore. It's not been working. Let's go back to the more personal story. Let's go back to something simple that the everyday person can watch and get behind. Like, oh, there's this bad person. They want to do this thing that's going to harm a lot of people for their own selfish gain. And an underdog has to come up with new powers. Well, he gets powers and he realizes he has to step up to the game and defeat this menacing presence. That is the typical Marvel and superhero architect storyline. And it works for a reason. This multiverse thing was never a good idea. If you want to expand it into space and things like that, that's fine. But otherwise, it's just not been working. The Spider-Man movies are the only one who have done it well. And keep in mind, that's a self-contained story. You're not connecting it to multiple different movies, which is where some of the real problems with multiverse comes in. It starts to feel like homework, not fun. But here's why these announcements were really bothering me. Aside from the fact that by taking Kang out of the storyline, it meant that we basically sat through Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium for no reason whatsoever. But that's a side tangent, whatever. I guess there's worse things I've done with 2 hours of my life. The problem here is that Marvel is now going back, and it's obvious they're desperate. Now, this is where I'm going to start spoiling Deadpool and Wolverine, but Deadpool and Wolverine does lean into the multiverse. In fact, it leans into the multiverse so much that essentially there's not really much of a story. In fact, the reason for Deadpool to even have been brought into the story himself, I'm not sure why that happened. Because if you look and this one guy does not do this one thing, then nothing in Deadpool and Wolverine happens. And to be frank, there's no reason for him to do that thing. So the movie is basically Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman bantering, and a bunch of cameos from other Fox X-Men movies show up to do things and have fun and kind of give it like a send-off. And look, here's the thing. It's all funny. It's entertaining throughout the whole thing. I can't deny it. That's why I barely gave it a passing grade in my print review on my website, because it was funny and entertaining, and that's ultimately what matters. But I did note, like, this isn't really about anything. And it kind of feels, it almost feels like a Marvel movie making love to itself. It's really strange when you stop and think about it. But there is a scene in the movie where there's a bunch of Deadpool variants because there's a multiverse thing, and the prime Deadpool, which is Ryan Reynolds, steps around and said, hey guys, I think we have to admit something. This multiverse thing, it isn't working. It isn't working. We tried it. People don't like it. It's confusing. So I think we need to just like disconnect from it. We just have to disconnect from it. And that was a great scene. And in fact, I was hoping that was Marvel making a public admission that this was not working. At one point, Deadpool even says you're joining the MCU at a low point, which it's like, okay, they're apologizing for what they let happen to this series, and they're going to course correct going forward. Well, what do you know? On the same weekend, there's a Marvel movie out there basically saying that this whole multiverse thing is a mistake. At Comic-Con in Hall H, there's a presentation going on that they are going to use the multiverse to bring Robert Downey Jr. back to the MCU, because his performance in Iron Man, people kind of forget, was one of the main reasons that movie was so successful. His performance as Tony Stark was a breath of fresh air. We had not seen a superhero like that. He made Tony Stark very human, very relatable. And, of course, Robert Downey made a lot of money from these movies, about $450 million. But he was definitely very core to the success of these Marvel movies. And I know there's a temptation to go back into that well. Now, I'll give them credit. They're not bringing Tony Stark in from well, when I say Tony Stark, I mean Iron Man, back from another dimension to help fight. They're bringing an evil Tony Stark variant to play Doctor Doom, and that's also kind of clever in a sense, because if Doctor Doom dies in this Avengers movie, then there's another Doctor Doom that's still in the current universe that hasn't been unleashed yet, and that could be played by a different actor for the next several years. There's a part of me that thinks this is Downey Jr. Saying, hey, you give me a big paycheck and I'll come back one time to help you guys out and course correct the ship. That's probably what happened. We're probably only going to get him for one, maybe two movies. It depends if Doctor Doom continues into the Secret War story, and he probably will. But how desperate can you come off looking at this point? Like, one of the few things that Marvel fans have been saying to defend the 30-plus films existence of this franchise, like, every Marvel movie is different. Which, by the way, is not true. Most of them are the same. And if you want proof, tell me, which Marvel movie is it that has the young man who gains powers, who has to fight an adversary, and the adversary is using a powerful stone, but thankfully he has the support of his love interest and his and her friends? Which Marvel movie is that? Chances are there's 7 of them, at least. If you take away the time stone thing, the stone in general, then it opens it up even more. Marvel movies are very formulaic. That's why they work. And even when they try to do something different, like with Eternals, they still end up in a climactic battle. Most of the time, the final battle involves things coming out of the sky. So, no, I don't think Marvel movies are that original. But just to give the other side a voice, they say, like, look, Ant-Man is like a heist movie. Winter Soldier is a political thriller. Avengers is an action movie. And you know, on that level, I can kind of see where they're coming from. Like, okay, they are doing the same formula, but they're finding new areas in which to do the formula in. Well, now you're basically saying, you know what? We got to go back to whatever we were doing in the past. So, look, Russo brothers. They haven't made great movies, but they're back. And Robert Downey Jr., he's back. And the Kang storyline that we think wasn't working, and honestly, I think one of the reasons it wasn't connecting with people is because it was playing out on TV. They had one movie with him, and it wasn't a good movie, but he was not the problem. Kang was one of the few things about that movie people liked. So if you give him a better movie, I think this would have worked out great. But they chickened out on that one, so it's just... Marvel seems increasingly desperate, and it just seems so obvious because I kind of wonder what's been going on. Because, you know, these movies take a long time to make. Like Deadpool and Wolverine, that took a long time for them to make. And probably took even longer because of the actors and writers strike. Like, they actually had to stop production for a while. And all that jazz. Well, I bet you what was happening is that they were realizing this multiverse thing isn't working. So a year or two ago, they decided, you know, we're going to like comment on that. And that's going to be kind of our little announcement that this isn't working. And we're going to start pulling back on the multiverse. Well, the movie's basically in the can, it's finished, and then more Marvel movies and TV shows keep bombing in the meantime. And then there's a sense like, oh shoot, we gotta do something. Let's bring Robert Downey Jr. back, but we can't just revive him. I know, let's make him Dr. Doom and we'll use the multiverse to... This is like... I don't see how this comes off as anything other than desperate. Now, of course, to give everyone's day in court, we don't know how this is going to play out on screen. It might be brilliant. And then we might be looking back at a podcast like this and going like, boy, you were complaining about nothing. I'm just telling you how it feels like it comes off. And to be honest, it's so cynical that it even kind of makes me want to go back to my Deadpool and Wolverine review and dock it a star, because it did rely so much on cameos and inside baseball for Marvel fans that it's like, maybe this isn't a very good movie. Maybe this is a movie that it's not even a movie, it's just corporate shilling, and maybe even if it's entertaining, I shouldn't be giving it a pass. And it's because of this announcement. Because I do not think this is a good announcement. Especially when the Marvel comics have so many characters that have not been tapped for potential. And maybe Marvel could even start making movies outside of superheroes. They have comic books that aren't superhero related. Why can't Marvel make a different type of movie as well? But instead, now we're really going back to the beginning in ways that I think are the worst possible way. And I don't know. The whole thing rubbed me the wrong way. I did want to get another person to help with the podcast to kind of bounce some ideas off of, but that person was not available. So you just get me today. So anyway, all that being said, I hope if you did see Deadpool and Wolverine, and judging by the numbers, you probably have, I hope you did enjoy it. And if you were at Comic-Con, I hope you enjoyed that. But hey, what do you think of this announcement? My brother probably sent me the best response to this news, and he's not a Marvel person. He's not a comic book fan. He's a sports guy. He sees the Marvel movies because he thinks they're fun, but overall is not the biggest superhero fan. He sent me the news article from Variety announcing this, and his question was, is this a joke? And that's probably the response that a lot of people have, like something along those lines where it's like they're not sure why. Yeah. Anyway, I'm finding it going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. I don't think this is going to be the end of Marvel movies, for the record. Like some people say, Marvel is doomed. I would not rule that out, but I would also not bet against them at this point because, as we've learned with Deadpool and Wolverine, waving keys in front of fans does wonders for the box office. But in the meantime, what are your thoughts on this? If you're listening to this podcast on a place that allows comments, I would love to know what you think about this announcement and comment below. If this is your first time listening and you like what you hear, why don't we make it official? Subscribe to the podcast. We're available on sites like YouTube, Spotify, Deezer, and Apple, and pretty much every major podcast platform out there. And I will see you at the movies. Take care, everyone. Hey, you made it to the end. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Just a few more things. First of all, the names that you see on the screen, these are our Patreon and YouTube member supporters. And I thank each and every one of them. Their support helps me make exclusive videos for Patreon and YouTube members, as well as keep the channel running. And of course, is just of huge kindness to me. Also, don't forget to check out the iCritic-led podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, whatever podcasting service you listen to. It is there. We definitely want to see you there. And hey, there's also other videos that you can check out. So, check out these other channels, these other videos, especially that one. I think that's a really good one.